them also to get an affordable solution with tenors that were more attractive for them. So I think this is a very good example where export credits can play a crucial role to get this kind of investments also in a developing country. And this project is to be up and running in the year 2022.
Very exciting. And we're talking now about the opportunities, and that's of course key to really transform. But I would like to ask some questions regarding the challenges to actually enable this transition. And I would like to start with you, Veronica, from a private perspective. What are the key challenges to then boost the sustainable finance?
Thank you, Emma. It's a very good question. I think it's fair to say that the world is very much on a learning path still, so we are very much building up the systems and the understanding. I think everyone could be in agreement on data being one of the biggest challenges. So how do we get and acquire and define what is the data around the net zero transition? What is it that companies should disclose? How is it that companies should calculate and count for them? What are the measures and methods we should use? How do we create something that's uniform so that when we talk about, let's say, the net zero carbon transition, that we do it in the same way and everything is kind of standardized across? And I think this is something something which has come up very much during the COP26 is this private-public or public-private kind of interaction. So we definitely need the public sector to set some standards for what is supposed to be reported and how it's supposed to be measured, potentially verified, so that everyone can gain in on the same way of looking at things. I think that's absolutely crucial. And it's quite evident from this conference that the public sector can't do it alone, the private sector cannot do it alone. This is where we need this true partnership and to solve these kind of challenges around kind of the measurement and the path forward.
Thank you. Johan, do you
Yes, I
agree?
absolutely agree. There's a sort of a huge data problem for all financiers because we are different types.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that, and the regulation is really progressing here, and I think Mark-Arne might sort of say something today that will be exciting. It's very important that all these net zero alliances coming up, that the financial sector as a whole actually take a step, not being so short term, but being long term. So these targets, I think, are really, really important because you have to start there and then you sort of progress and make plans that are more short term, but you need to start in the long term. But I would say another thing as well, because very often we talk about we want to make those billions to become trillions, and we need to sort of mix public and private capital. But the ecosystem of the financial industry is quite complex. There are different types of capital. You have the institutional capital, and you have the banks lending out money, and you have the export credit agencies, for instance. We have different roles and different purposes. And the thing is, the big challenge will be to sort of take out different purposes and make them green, or combine them with something green, so you do both. You have an export credit system that both is expanding the export industry and also make it green. And you have a bank that is both sort of lending to the society and make the society green. And the institutional capital, which is obvious, it's the pension capital, should be long-term and should be invested in green projects. But they have a challenge with fiduciary duties that they need to sort of sort out. And this is progressing. But I think the big challenge will be to work together, actually. For financial different capital to work together, and you can come in because you cannot finance a project with loans if you don't have an institutional capital that is thinking the same thing, and that is actually what we see right now in some of the more difficult projects that we have in Sweden. That is really transition projects. We see that you have an institutional capital with a purpose, with a green purpose. And then we can help from an export credit agency, an export credit system perspective with a green purpose. And you have a bank with a green purpose. And then you can sort of solve these difficult financial issues together. So we need to also, the financial market or the financial industry needs to think collaboration as the industry now has started to do.
Indeed. And when you talk about collaboration, are you then talking about collaboration between the investors and the customers, or also between public and private investors and financial institutions?
Yes, I'm talking actually about both. Because if you look at sustainable finance, it consists of three sort of main things. Move away from fossil fuel, and mobilize to green, and then to engage. And that is a really, really important thing to do, to engage in clients, to a bank, and see how that transition path is developing, understand that transition path, and really finance that transition path. Not move away from some industries and just prioritize the green, but to help engage in clients to actually make this transition path. So that is really, really important. But something that we haven't discussed is actually the collaboration between the financial industry. I think we need to do that because it's more complex. I think everybody's thinking about money. It's just money. It's not. It's different sort of actors and different purposes, and we need to cooperate as well.
Thank you.
And I do think we have started that, and we have started within Team Sweden, and now we are taking the next step to also collaborate with SIDA, the Swedish aid organization. So I think, and the government has also given us a clear direction there that here is room for cooperation. And I think I'm also here, of course, as representing the Swedish export credit system, which is one of the best in the world, since we are also a AAA rated country. We should be very proud of that, and we should use it to a much larger extent. And I think I want to also to raise the awareness of export credits in this financing that is so important. We have to collaborate. And when it comes to export credits, it says in the new ICC white paper report that export credits around the world have a yearly turnover of $700 billion. It's the same level as aid finance. It's incredible. It's a really huge potential here. So we have to take use of that potential. And I think apart from collaborating to a larger extent, we also need to look at the regulations, because we are also, as an export credit agency, regulated by international regulations, and I'm looking at the OECD arrangement. And here we need to have much more flexibility so we can incentivize green investments. We have to be able to offer a more incentivized financing by longer tenors, maybe more bullet payments and more incentives. I think, and that's something we need now.
Right.
I can just talking about challenges. I mean, I think we are 7 countries within the EU that now together are very ambitious for export credit systems to really transform and become aligned with the Paris Agreement. But there are many, many more, and we need. That is a big challenge for us to really sort of get together, both from a Nordic perspective, but also between those countries that really want to progress within the EU, and then influence the others and have this discussion. And I think we do some progress actually, because the discussion has changed. And we are really actually now talking within the OECD, who is regulating the whole export credit system. We are now talking about how we can maybe, not decide anything, incentivize actually green projects within the export credit system. That would be a huge step forward, actually, because it's so important to de-risk these types of projects all over the world.
That really leads us into the next question. And Veronica, would you say that we're progressing fast enough?
No, I think if you look historically, we have progressed. But what is evident is that we need to do more. So we are not on our way to 1.5, we are rather on our way to 2.7 or something like that. And the challenge is that we have so little time. We know we have to move faster during the next 10 years in order not to reach the tipping points where we really don't know what will happen. So I think we need to do more. We need to kind of get together on this one now. And I think this is something that is what I've heard several, let's say, prominent speakers say. In this conference, there is this kind of sense of urgency which is evident everywhere, and I think it's bigger now than ever before, because we really are in the same boat on this one. So you could say, no, we're not progressing fast enough, but we know we aren't, and that's the key to the solution, that we know we have to do it. There are no options, but we need to get kind of the thing going.
And what would you say about regarding your customers? Do you see that they are progressing fast enough? Are they requesting this as well? Or what trends do you see among your customers?
I think many of the big customers are really, really aware of climate change. They have very initiated organizations, they have risk management functions, they have opportunities functions, they know the sales. I think the largest are, but I think in earnest, what we want as a bank is really that the customers know the transition plans. They have to be in alignment, and many of the Nordic countries are very ambitious on climate change. So they need to make sure they follow the national pathways. They need to make sure they follow the industry pathways, which might be defined in the various countries in the Nordic region. So I think the largest customers are certainly on the move. I think there's a large segment under the large customers, the medium-sized companies, the small companies. There we really need a kind of a coherent policy framework to make sure everyone gets on the same train. So I think companies are in a little bit different stages of preparedness on this one, but certainly the largest are aware. So we really want to see transition management, and we want to be there to help the customers finance that, but it needs to be defined with targets and measures, and kind of really the boards and the leadership teams in those companies need to step on this and really define it very carefully and in detail, so everyone knows what's going to happen, and then it's also much easier to finance.
Johan, what would you say? Are we progressing fast enough?
I think we're progressing fast, actually. If it is fast enough, I don't know. But what we see in the financial market right now is that there are popping up a lot of green financial instruments. And you have green loans, you have social loans, and you have sustainability-linked loans. And it's like a very big interest in actually developing this. And we see a lot of actually good interests from corporates to use these types of projects. And then you sort of force companies into a green sort of path. So I think we have come to a stage where the financial industry is interested in the question, and then it could sort of take more speed. I also think that there is then when we talk about the export credit system, I think we are really actually moving quite fast in the Nordic regions and so on. But not all countries are doing that. And I mean, Sweden has a maybe easier path to do that. And there are other countries that have not that easy path. But I think there is one actor that we maybe underestimate, and that is the market, actually. I don't know when that sort of market kind of tipping point will come, but once the market starts to price in, and that happens when nobody expects it, it's like then you will have automatically a price sort of influence. Obviously, a CO2 emission tax would be lovely because you sort of would make that happen faster. But I think we're not so far away from actually having the market play a role, a more active role in the financial market, a more active role in the transition. We can see that it's very, very difficult to get financing in the fossil fuel industry today. It's almost impossible. They are not investing anymore. They are actually giving the money back to the shareholders. So we see some kind of sort of signs that the market is starting to sort of develop in that direction. I think that could be very, very exciting when that happens.
You seem pretty hopeful. It's encouraging to hear. What about you, Mette? What do you think?
I regularly, every year, we meet with the heads of export and project finance of all international banks. And if I look back a couple of years ago, it was all about discussing doing no harm. We want to make sure that the project that we finance follow the international regulations, etc. Then a couple of weeks ago, I went to Madrid and met on a trade event, a banking event, met with all the heads of export and project finance again. And this time it was a completely different discussion. Now it was about business opportunities. Yeah. Everyone wants to stay relevant. They know they have to do that, and they want to do sustainable projects. And I think they want to team up also with Sweden and the Swedish export system, because they know that we are in the forefront. Because I do believe, and I want to confirm what you are saying here, I think the Swedish export credit system, we have worked very hard to align the system with the Paris 1.5 degree goal. And we have started doing that already. We have taken it down to sub-goals. We started by, as you mentioned, not guaranteeing the financing of transport and exploration of coal. We've done the same when it comes to new extraction projects within oil and gas. We're taking the next step for existing projects in 2022. And then we have also constituted, as the first export credit system in the world, we have constituted a new scientific climate council. Because we know this is a complex material, we want to make sure that we base our decisions on science. And that has been very helpful in our business. And also, as was mentioned here, we have launched a green product as also one of the first export credit institutions. And we have also more stringent requirements when it comes to projects that we guarantee with high greenhouse emissions. We want to make sure that there are no in-lox effects, that there are transition plans, etc. So I think we have done a lot so far, and even though there are more to do, of course.
I think I would like to compliment Marie what you said. I think there is this. Earlier, climate change was very much seen as a risk, but it's a risk not to move. So it's a risk not to capture the opportunities. So we need to look at it for the upside. So I mean, obviously, to get the system moving, what is needed is a transition in the energy system. So we need to phase out coal one way or the other, and we need to invest more in renewables. And the access to clean energy is absolutely instrumental to transition the industries to low carbon. So there is just zillions of opportunities to be captured, and we need to kind of change our mindset to really get there to the opportunity side, because that's the way to kind of make the transition. It's not by risk, it's about capturing the opportunities, making the transition via new investments.
We see also that the private sector and the financial sector are also requesting all these new standards and regulations to be able to report and measure the impact. And until we have all of these policies in place, well, how could you possibly create impact and inspire others to still move the right direction? What would you say, Veronica?
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. We are definitely not there where everyone knows exactly what to disclose, but I think there are a few standards which are quite universally accepted by time. So you need to disclose and measure your own emissions, all the scopes as far as possible. We do already have standards for disclosure, so TCFDs, they're available and companies can sign up for them, and it creates a framework for how to disclose issues. And so I do believe companies on their own can work quite much. Banks are certainly doing that, and we are ourselves. But to get the systemic change going and not to waste time, it would be better to have much higher degrees of standardization and methods which we agree on that this is the way to do it. It would just speed it up a bit faster. But I think everyone knows this is the case, so I think that kind of creates the promise for us also working towards that. But a lot is being done already now. I think companies sometimes feel they are a bit in isolation on their own, in their own chambers, and we can't have that to make the speedy transition. So we need to collaborate more within industries and across sectors, within countries and across borders.
Collaboration is key, indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Collaboration and regulation.
And regulations, indeed. But EKN and SEK, you're one of the first credit agency, as you export credit agency, you said, that have been also imposing this new regulation that you will no longer finance extraction of fossil fuels and then focus a larger share on green projects. That is really a front-running approach. What reactions have that been in your fellow agencies and collaborators across the world?
If I go back to my meetings with the banks,
yes,
it's quite interesting because 2 years ago, before the pandemic, we had meetings with all the banks, and we were explaining that we will no longer support financing of extraction of coal. And the banks were really surprised, and they were reluctant. The key clients and coal is still very important, etc. And then now 2 years later, no international bank financed the extraction of coal. Now the discussion is the role of gas. What is the role of natural gas, particularly in developing markets? So the discussion has moved completely.
Right. And now during COP26, what kind of expectations do you have?
May I just
Yes,
add
please.
a
Yes,
little
yes.
bit to that? Because we had this council meeting
Yeah.
just talking about the role of the natural gas, and especially in developing countries, as you mentioned. And there is still, I think, we're moving quite fast, I think, towards the green, but we shouldn't sort of forget sort of a just transition, and especially in countries where you don't have the institutional capacity or the capacity at all to actually change into green. So our council actually told us that it's not economically or climate motivated to invest in any new fossil fuel anywhere, actually, because it's cheaper now with fossil free or green technology. But on the other hand, there's an institutional kind of lock-in in many countries. They don't know that this is cheaper and better. They know it's better climate-wise, but they don't know it's cheaper. So we work together with SIDA in various projects, actually, to raise the institutional capacity to know this, and to sort of strengthen sort of the knowledge of how you can make it possible, actually, in countries where it hasn't been possible before, and it's not even on the map, totally dependent. So this, I think, is a very important sort of angle to it as well. We need to make it just. So we have a window now until we phase out gas as well. So we can finance gas projects in certain circumstances where this institutional capacity is not there, and you're dependent, and we have a lot of other conditions for it. But when it comes to oil, new oil projects and new coal projects, it's zero from now.
I just also would like to, because I know the time is running out, but I think for everyone it's clear that there's massive need of investment, particularly in developing countries. And here we really have to support. And Sweden has exactly what these countries need. And I think the financing here, we are here to support that. We want to make sure that the Swedish technology gets also to the developing markets. And I think SEK and IKEA particularly can play an important role here. So I really want to emphasize on that. Thank you.
To work together to pioneer the possible. Veronica, what would you say? What are your expectations, and what is the wished outcome of this COP conference and the negotiations regarding finance?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I think my expectations is really that we will see more commitments coming out. We have seen already commitments from crucial countries like India, for instance. We have seen commitments on the halt and reverse of deforestation, which is really important. So I think many players probably have waited to come out with their commitments to this event, and the more firm commitments we can have from various key stakeholders, where we have the big countries involved, we have all the kind of stakeholders which are crucial, them coming out with firm commitments, as firm as possible, detailing how they will achieve it, the better. So today is the Finance Day, obviously expecting some exciting commitments coming out, and also around this public-private. I really think that that's somewhere where the key is how to solve that cooperation. So hopefully we get some clarity around that as well. So really, I think everything has been quite positive coming out, but let's see, the commitments, as someone well said in a panel, is that it's not what we do here today, it's what we do when we get home and start working on it. That's what's key.
That's definitely key. Johan, what are your expectations?
Well, my hope would be that we have some kind of agreement on a CO2 tax somewhere in the future. I think that would be enough for the market to start to move, actually. So that is my really big hope. I also hope that we will actually mobilize those 100 billions as a signal that the Western world is actually supporting the developing world, because that is such an important signal. And as we said, we can play that role to actually make those billions to become trillions. But I think we need that signal from here to make it. I mean, the theme is action and it's climate finance. So I think we actually, that is one very important sort of thing, I think.
Okay. Very. Maria, would you like to add to that?
I completely agree on that. Absolutely.
I would like to ask you a last question. Where do you think we are in 3 years? I will start with you.
I hope we are on a firm pathway towards 2030, because we start now. When we get home, we start implementing and laying out those plans if we don't have them. So in 3 years' time, we should be on the targets we set out today. So you need to have your sight on 2030, but you need to set intermittent targets, and you work towards those today. And one possible year is 2023, 2025. This is where I want to be. So I want to see those plans, and then we measure in 3 years' time. So definitely on a pathway towards halving the emissions.
Thank you. Johan, what do you think?
I think
and what are your hopes?
We have done a lot of green energy projects all over the world. I really think so. I also think that both the product market and the financial market has get hold of the green transition. So we have both the pressure coming from the financial market and the banks and everything. So the corporates will have a nightmare with all the regulations and everything they have to report to us. But I also think that the product market is moving. So the consumers are really sort of aware of what they're buying, what type of CO2 they actually are buying, what the price is. And it could become an indirect sort of pricing of CO2. And I do think we have a CO2 kind of tax or price in the world, a global standard for that.
So do I. I believe it as well. But I hope that in 3 years' time that other countries have come as far as we have when it comes to export credit system. We have taken some very bold decisions, and now it's time for other countries to follow. That's extremely important. I also hope that we have the incentives, the right incentives for financing extremely important projects in the developing markets. And I think we will. So I look positively on for the development.
Thank you so much. I think that's an excellent way to finish this panel discussion. Thank you so much, Veronica, Johan and Marie, for taking part in this discussion. And thank you everyone for tuning in and being here at the Swedish Pavilion at COP26. And we really look forward to follow the negotiations, and we really hope that the message that you've been bringing here today, and we really hope that that's going to accelerate the green transition in the Nordics and on emerging markets, and to really ensure the green transition globally. So thank you very much, and looking forward to hear back from you soon.